Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. We're very happy to have you here. We're going to be talking about women of color uh, participating in our armed forces, and a suitable and wonderful topic for today, Veterans Day. And we will get to that in just a minute, but I want to acknowledge that we are meeting on the ancestral homeland of the Puget Sound Coast Salish people, specifically here on Bainbridge, the Suquamish tribe, the people of the clear salt water, who have lived on the shores of the Salish Sea and on the Salish Sea since time immemorial. We honor them and we are learning from their stewardship of these lands and waters. I also would like to acknowledge that we are the beneficiaries of a sponsorship from Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island, which offers independent living, assisted living, and memory care on a beautiful campus up on Rolling Bay. They have day stay and respite programs, and they'd love to give you a tour. You can learn more at fieldstonecommunities.com, or you can call Celia or Jamie at 206 594 1010, 206 594 1010, and ask about a tour. And they'd be glad to also treat you to a meal in their bar and grill. And thank you very much for suggesting this topic and putting this panel together, which is, people will be coming and going a little bit, and we also welcome anybody who wasn't specifically asked to be on a panel to share their experiences as well.
Thank you, Reed. Yeah, and thank you, Lena, because Lena, you were instrumental in helping put this panel together. And I think it will come together in a little at a time, as often happens. We do have a number of people who said they're trying to get on or they're almost ready or whatever. So we'll just take it from there. But um, Fawn, do you mind kicking us off since you're the first one uh, on the Zoom? We are really, I feel like so often Veterans Day programs are really centered around guys, around men, the experience of men, and women are often either an afterthought or sometimes not even mentioned, um, which I find troublesome. And I would love to just get that. What the idea of this program was to try to kind of get a different perspective on what it's like to serve in the military, serve our country as a woman, especially as a woman of color, and how does that differ from, or in your opinion or your experiences from that of the standard view, I guess we could call it.
Yeah, sure. That's a lot to unpack.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
I'm Fawn Santos, and my twin sister Swift should be joining us shortly as well. And like you said, some people are trying to join, work through Wi-Fi issues, and she's actually active duty serving our Navy right now over in Washington D.C. I was in the Army. I first joined the National Guard right out of high school, so I did the National Guard for 2 years. And then when 9/11 happened, I was activated and sent active duty. So I did 8 years active duty, so 2000 to 2008. And my sister and I are third generation veterans, and so for us, it was really a natural path to join the military. My grandfather and all of his brothers were in the military. Um, Uncles, a lot of cousins, and then in our immediate family, it's my sister, and then our younger brother as well, just retired from the Marine Corps. So for us, it was really the right path to take. I know I can speak for all of us when I say most of us joined so that we could go to college and have some support there on the financial side because we did come from Native American community. We grew up on the Cooley Reservation here in Washington State, and it was a wonderful childhood filled with culture and traditions, but we were underrepresented and underserved in that community. So it was a wonderful pathway to be able to get out and travel and be able to go to college. But for Native people, we do serve at a very high rate, higher than any other ethnic group, actually. And that's especially true for Native women, who also serve at a very high rate in the military. So once I got to the military, I found that it was a really diverse and welcoming place. And even now, since I've been out of the military for quite some time, it still remains probably one of the most diverse places I've worked. So for me, it was a really wonderful experience. Oh, you're on
Yeah,
mute.
you found a community ready to welcome you there. That's pretty
Yes,
great.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot of Native people right off when I started serving, and my first assignment was actually in Germany, and I was surprised to find Native people in Germany, which was really comforting and welcoming to be so far from home. Times are definitely different than I think nowadays in the military. There are similar groups such as ERGs, or employee resource groups, dedicated to Native people. I know I live in DuPont, right outside of JBLM right now. There's a Native American um, support group or service members group here on the base. So they do a lot of activities. So I think it's a wonderfully diverse place.
Lena, it looks like you've got a question or a comment.
I do. Quick question. Within my own extended family, and especially with me talking with some of the younger ones of our tribe on the Filipino side and the Native side, one of the things that came up a lot that really held some of our family members and our tribal members back from enlisting in the military was the traumatic history and the distrust of the government. And I'll go directly into my grandmother. That's how close it was taken as a child and put in a residential school. There's, generational stuff all the way down just from that act alone. And so I was looking back before this talk going, gosh, trying to count all the people in my extended family who joined the military, male and female, but a lot of those who didn't. And there's probably more who didn't. So I guess my question is, because we're talking about the women fonts, since you kind of have the floor right now, did you go through a personal reflection in your decision to make? I mean, I also have cousins who joined for the college piece, right? And that's great. But was that something that you had to kind of, think to yourself, okay, your family this, but then this is a great opportunity for me moving forward and things like that. Was there that moment of having to kind of reflect on what your decision was going to be?
Definitely. And I see my sister has joined also, Swift Sanchez, and we're identical twins, just in case anybody is wondering why we look so much alike. Um, but I'm older by 15 minutes. So, I think, and I can speak for Swift too, and I'll let her answer this question as well. I mean, we all had our reasons for wanting to join. Certainly, I think when you do serve, there's a lot of different times where you're experiencing that sort of conflict in your mind of, am I doing the right thing, and serving, this organization, so to speak, or and that hasn't always supported our people. And I've certainly experienced that with being stationed in places that were formerly boarding schools, for example. But we were raised to really honor the warrior spirit that Native people have. And Native people are, in general, very, very patriotic. We want to take care of our land, our people. And a part of that means, putting that aside and defending our country when we were under threat. So for me, it was always about that. Still remains about that. And I'm proud to have been able to serve. But certainly there's that conflict there, which is why I know I spend a lot of time doing panels like this to educate people about the history of Native American people, and also the relationship that Native people have with the federal government, because that has, really shifted over time, and it hasn't always been good, and there is a lot of distrust there. So I think the more people understand about that history, and the more effective we can be in working in these communities.
Oh, thank you, Fawn. Swift, do you want to jump in and add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. I'll just piggyback on what some of Fawn said. She mentioned we have quite a few members in our family who have served. And I think one thing that we recognize and a lot of Native people do is that a lot of us come from very matriarchal families. So for us, it's not unusual in the women in our family to be in leadership positions or to serving, in public service roles. It's something that we believe in. It's something we teach our daughters is important. It's something that we teach them that they can do, whether they have family or not as well. So there are some conflicts, but we've always supported each other and just worked through that.
And I guess I would say, do you feel like things are different in your generation than they have been for older women?
I can't speak for an older generation, but I would say probably. I think we still have a long way to go. Honestly, some of the judgment and pushback we get is sometimes from other women who weren't raised in those same family dynamics or really don't understand But I think it has come a long way. I think we still have work to do. It is still a challenge as a woman in the military. There's not a lot of resources, out there for the husbands at home or the families when it is the wife who's gone. For example, I'm away from my family right now, and it's something that we're very used to. It's kind of a normal way of life for us. We've established our own pattern, which I think is probably the key. But I think overall it's probably improved.
I've been, of course, wondering how things are going to look in the years to come. And of course, nobody really knows, but things obviously are going to be a little different. And I'm wondering if you have thoughts or views about that.
Well, I think I probably have a unique perspective since I'm sitting in Washington, D.C. right now. I was actually at an event today with President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, so that was a big honor. It's sad to think about things changing. I think reality, some things might change. I think as a military overall, we do our very best to take care of the people that serve. I just don't know what it's going to look like. I think like all of us, we're all a little worried and uncertain.
Yeah. Reed.
Well, I'm wondering if either of you might be willing to talk a little bit about the challenges in the current military and how things might have changed during the course of your service in terms of, being more embracing of women soldiers and the roles that you play to help defend our country. I'm thinking that there's been a lot of shift in the culture as a whole regarding women's engagement, and somebody had remarked that it was only 50 years ago that women were given the right to be the sole holders of a credit card. So a lot has changed, and I'm sure it's still changing. And I think of maybe the military is one of those places. Could you speak to that?
I'd be happy to start. I think because I have actually been out of the military for 14 years now, and Swift is still serving. So I think we have that perspective where we both joined, I think, around the same time. And when I got out, there was very little support for veterans that were transitioning out of the service. By the time I got out, I had two master's degrees. I had led teams of hundreds and $1 million budgets, but it was really seen as me being inexperienced, and I had a really really hard time finding a job. There weren't companies out there lined up to hire veterans like they are now. I think the veterans now do get a lot more support, and that work is really transferable. But back then, I had a really really hard time, and it was very difficult to find a job. And we talked about this in the beginning. Also, back then, people were very uncomfortable with hearing the stories of women veterans and really trying to understand that experience. I think a lot of people also assumed that it was a terrible experience and that I was coming out of it with some trauma, which wasn't necessarily the case for me. It had been a wonderful experience despite serving, through the beginning of Operation Enduring Freedom. But I think times have changed from what I've seen. And I actually I spent 4 years in government contracting, and then I worked for Amazon corporate headquarters for 11 years. And that was one company I know that where I really saw in the tech space a lot of companies creating programs for transitioning service members that really didn't exist back then. So for me, it's been really nice to see that and really positive. So what's been your experience?
Yeah, that's a good segue. So I have been serving for about 19 and a half years now. And good time in, I'm transitioning. I'm a Navy reservist, so I'm transitioning out of the military into a full-time civilian workforce. There are a lot more resources out there. I immediately joined a couple programs, and I'm happy to say I got a job offer after 4 months in some of these programs that really helped me shape my job qualification, shape my resume, and really turn it into the language that companies and recruiters were looking for. So I think I can attest to the fact that things have changed in that respect. It's not unusual now to have veterans or women veterans coming out and joining the workforce in other areas.
One thing I've been hearing a lot about is like the Suquamish tribe, which is, our neighbors immediately off the island here, has created a whole program for welcoming warriors like bringing people back who maybe have had a more traumatic experience. And I know there are some other tribes that do that. Have you, either of you, had any experience with that, or know people who have had tribal support in that way?
I'll just-
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I mean, I was just going to echo again. I think when I got out, that those programs weren't necessarily there. I did return home to Forks, and there was really no program set up for veterans that were returning home at that time. And it was still early days, but back in 2008. So I think now there's a lot more support, but I just will call out, I think that's one of the biggest difficulties for Native American veterans is that often we're returning to communities that do have a higher rate of poverty. We're returning to underserved communities. So for me, that was very much a reality, but I'm happy to see now what Suquamish Tribe and some of the other communities are doing.
Yeah, yeah, and exactly so. And for those on the panel that don't know, I'm a big fan of the Suquamish tribe. I worked for the tribe for 9 years. I was a part of their warrior program as well. And I know they've developed some amazing programs. It was amazing when I was part of it, and it's amazing now. And they've done a really good job of looking at that. So I am also a combat veteran. I deployed to Afghanistan 5 years ago, and coming back was very difficult. Coming back, as a woman and integrating back into a home and family life and then back into a workspace and a community is difficult. I think it's gotten a lot better over the years, but it's still challenging. I think by the Suquamish tribe, recognizing that culture is such a big part of our belonging and our identity, they're absolutely on the right track. Absolutely.
Susan, I believe you had a question or comment.
I do have a comment about women in the military because there's a wonderful book out, and I think she's a state of Washington writer, and her name is Kristen Hanna, and the book is called The Women, and she's looking at the Vietnam War with the women who not only transferred airplanes, took care, mostly nurses and doctors who took care of the wounded and ill and what have you. And it was quite revealing to me. And of course, they came back with completely no recognition, no honors, no nothing. And yet they were like the backbone of keeping everyone healthy. I didn't know if any of you had read that book.
I haven't read the book, but I love Kristen Hanna. I'm a huge fan.
Too.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And really she's, okay.
Right.
I'm gonna copy that down so I can read it later. But yeah, women have been serving in many roles for many, many generations. I mean, throughout some of our earliest years. I come from the Navy where, we've had women serving for many years and they didn't get a lot of recognition. And they were very important roles. I mean, absolutely, from administration to healthcare to driving, they were the backbone of some of our biggest battles in history. So I'm going to have to read that book. Thank you for bringing it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that, women in pretty much every aspect are overlooked a lot, but particularly I think that the women of color in the armed forces has been a perspective we just really don't hear a whole lot about. And I'm really interested in, you two are obviously much younger than many of us, but even between you, it's like you have pretty different experiences too, from being in the reserves or being in active combat. And I'm glad to hear you feel like there's more support. Do you feel like the support that there is there for you is any different to what it would be if you were male?
Yes, I do think there's a lot more support for male service members. Absolutely. I remember being deployed to Afghanistan, and there'd be programs for sending Christmas gifts home and things, reading your children books, all this stuff, and it was all geared towards the male service members. And I remember thinking it was a bit odd, and that didn't quite exist for all of us, even though we were all going through it. So it is a somewhat isolating experience.
Anybody?
I mean, I'm just thinking to supporting Swift while she was deployed and supporting her husband too. It's like there just wasn't much out there for families where it was the mom that was deployed. And we were trying to find programs for Kashan, Swift's wonderful husband, who was home supporting the children. And all of the programs for families are set up for a wife and children to be able to attend, but not necessarily that non-traditional family and non-traditional meaning any other type of family. So I think it's still a little bit archaic, and we kind of joke that we're looking for like magnums and car decals and things that Sean can have, and they're just not out there. So I think one of us are just going to have to start a company at some point.
There you go. Right. When there's a gap, we can step up and fill it. Right.
Yeah.
I would be curious if you would share, either one of you or both of you, like, what would you say or what do you say to younger Native women who are considering? Because it sounded like when you were talking about long family tradition, it was mostly guys, right?
Mhm.
I didn't hear you mention aunties or uncles or grandparents so much, but mostly the men. So something sparked for you, right?
I mean, I think in our family, a lot of the women haven't served because they're out there leading other things. We do have a lot of family that is in leadership positions. Our aunt, Tana Sanchez, is one of the first Native women to serve in the state of representatives, or as a representative for the state of Oregon. So we are very much a matriarchal family where everybody's out there kind of running things and leading organizations. I think for us, it really started to, and again, I don't want to speak for Swift, but we really were driven to go to college, and we were first generation college graduates as well. And so I know for myself, that was a big piece of it, was just wanting to get an education. And it's something that I talk a lot about now to younger Native American people is just getting out there, getting an education, getting all the certifications you can get, and just being as qualified as you can be. For me, it's really important to just remove that question of being qualified, because that is something that we often have to overcome as a barrier when we're out there applying for jobs and programs. So I would encourage young Native women that are thinking about doing this to really consider it, because it is a pathway to getting an education and being debt free while being able to do it, but doing something important like serving your country at the same time. But now there's all these amazing programs to also get tech skills and all of these other certifications when you do get out, that you can really be set up for the future.
So how does that even work, to be working full time in the service and going to school, and you come out with what, how many masters and whatnot? That sounds like a lot of time, like two lives.
It's not uncommon. I think so. Seen this too. I think a lot of people, for me, a lot of people were getting their degrees while we were serving, and so we were all kind of in school at the same time. There a lot of bases do have degree programs that you can join together. So when I got my first master's in human resources, I was attending a training course with a bunch of other human resource managers in the Army. We all just went together, so we had sort of a cohort style
Nice.
master's degree program, and so you had buddies that were doing it, and yeah, you were working or you were studying. That's what you did. But it's not uncommon, and a lot of people do use the tuition assistance while they're still serving.
Yeah,
Reed,
the military is generally very supportive of education programs. Same thing. I attended a hybrid program a couple of evenings a week on the local base as well, and it was with people I served with. So it's a lot of work. It's the same as working full time and going to school, which a lot of people do. But the military is pretty supportive of that.
I think Reed had a
Yeah, I was just wondering to kind of go a little further on that. Maybe for Swift, this is the question about if you had advice for a young woman who is thinking about doing this now, what guidance could you give them about how to anticipate navigating the military, doing service as a woman?
Well, like Fawn, I mean, I was really lucky. I've had a really great experience in the military. Everybody's been very welcoming. I haven't really experienced a lot of negativity, other than, a little lack of resources and a little isolation. But, I agree. It is a pathway for me. I was a teenage parent. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to do something, and that was my pathway. And my sister had joined, my brother had joined, and I saw that had been a pathway for them to something bigger. And so, I would tell them, if you need a pathway somewhere else besides where you are now, this is it. It's a road to start on, whether you stay on it for a couple of years or you stay on it forever. When I joined, I didn't know I'd be here 19 years later. But I stuck with it. And so I would say just see it as a pathway and take every opportunity that's offered to you, because there's some really great ones.
I wonder if any of you have questions. Chas, do you want to jump in?
Yes, and pardon me for being late, and thank you so much, Lieutenant Commander Swift. Sanchez, it's so nice to meet you, and also Elders Present and Seattle Griot Project, just respect. I see you. always. But knowing that you're getting in, and I think you're guarding for the inauguration. And I don't want to be the buzzkill on your call, but I'm going to ask a real question. Like, first of all, sister,
Yeah.
I know you're serving a commander in chief that may not represent all of your values, but I understand that you can extract and do well despite the fact of having leadership. But and not but respectfully, like, how does it feel to be under a commander in chief that people don't always agree in their views? Because I'm a military family, so serve and duty is just a part of what we do. My dad passed at JBLM, and I have a long-standing family that have served and have African Americans that have served before they even had voting rights were still serving. So, like, when I look back at our history and I'm like, were we confused or just that was our pathway? And I understand Jesus and military were hand in hand for a long time in my family and still is. But what do you have to do to serve the capacity of someone who may oppress you?
Yeah, yeah, no, you're right. That's a real question, and it's one that it's been a difficult couple of weeks for me. I'll be honest. Like the first week or so, I really had to put it in perspective and look back at what my purpose was overall. And I've been asked this before, why do Native people serve in the military and for a country, like I think we mentioned earlier, that has oppressed them? And it's not about that. It's the fact that, we embrace the warrior spirit and the fact that no matter who's the commander in chief, this country is ours and it's ours to defend. So for me, that means
That was a whole vibe. What you just said, that's a whole level.
yeah, snap, snap, snap.
You can just keep saying that. Just start off everything. Just be like, by the way, this country is ours, because I have heard that in my family, but I've also heard it belongs to baby Jesus, so we serve. And sometimes we serve in a capacity that is against our own and oppressive, patriarchal, longtime spiritual practices that aren't connected to our spiritual practices. So I get a little confused as to who we're serving every once in a while.
Yeah, no, and that's what I had to do. I had to kind of look back at internally and say, what am I serving? I'm serving my country that belongs to me and my family and my people. And so for me, that means it doesn't matter to me who the commander in chief is. It's a bummer. It's hard. I got to suck it up and not say stuff. But it's about ensuring, a safe inauguration for the public, for everybody here, for the citizens that are watching, and moving forward and hopefully making a difference. But that's just what it comes back to for me. And I can't speak for all Native people, but for a lot of us, I think that's the perspective.
Fawn, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I mean, I think that's absolutely right. And Chastity, I mean, it has some good points. I think we have a similar sort of history with our people as well, where, we at some point, Native American people lost citizenship. We weren't considered citizens of the United States. We didn't have a right to vote until the 1920s, and we still weren't even citizens then, but we still showed up. We've always voted at the highest rate that of anybody, because we are stewards of this land, and we're here to take care of it. We don't have anywhere else to go. So, they'll go back to where you came from thing. It's hilarious when we find it really funny when people say it to us. We're like, well, we've got nowhere else. This is it. So we will always support and defend that. And I think it just comes down to surrounding yourself as much as you can with good people, trying to set that example for other people and model the behavior we want to see. And, there will be another election in 4 years.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. Thank you for your time, Lieutenant Commander. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
It is for all of us. I think we're all looking at this next chunk of time and trying to figure out how, we can support the parts of this country that we love, the parts of this human race that we love, with dignity and truth and valor. But yeah, those are some hard decisions to make, isn't it? This is not an easy time. It makes me think of that Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. And it wasn't supposed to be fun. It was supposed to be a disaster. And I'm thinking, oh, I get it. Now I get it. But here we are. So what are we going to do, right? How do we move forward? And again, like, as you two, as speaking to younger women, as we've been sort of saying, or younger guys too, right? Would you still recommend, like, yeah, the schooling is important, and I think that is very, very valuable and valid. And it sounds like neither one of you felt like you paid too much, in the sense that it wasn't, you didn't have to skimp on your own service or your own lives to be able to do that, right? Um, but yeah, I'm just hoping that your path will still be a good path for people to come. Do you feel like it is, or?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. You know, one thing I tell the people in my life that maybe don't, you know, that don't come from Native families or marginalized communities is you know, the best thing you can do is be good advocates and good listeners, and you become a good advocate by listening and by having these hard conversations. You know, I think we're scared to have hard conversations sometimes. Because we don't want to offend anybody, but it's important to have these conversations, and there is a way to do it in an educated manner. And you know, I'll give you an example. My husband he's white, and he grew up in a really different environment than I did, like the total opposite. So his views were a little bit different, and so a lot of times I share stories of you know, things that I grew growing up on the reservation, experiencing racism as a young child. You know, it just the different things that I had to go through, even as a woman, right? That we all go through, that maybe a white cisgendered male maybe doesn't have to go through. And it's given him a lot more perspective because he just never had to look at those things or think about those things. And it's made him a better advocate for people like me and the people in his family now. And it's because we've been able to have those conversations. So I think that's what I tell people, is just have the hard conversations, do it respectfully. You don't have to do it with hatred. You can do it with respect.
Yes, exactly. Fawn, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, I'll just add, you know, we don't live in easy times right now. We very much come from a family of, if you don't like it, change it.
Mhm.
You know, you can't complain in our family without somebody telling you, then what are you going to do about it? And that's just how we grew up. So, I mean, I'll just put that out there. And that's something that we really believe. You don't like it, get out there and get a degree, run for office, become a doctor, become a lawyer, be the person that you want to see in the room representing you. You don't like who's there right now, then you go do it. And I think that's what we're all working towards in our family. And it's something that's really important to us, is to be the most qualified that we can be, so that we can be in those spaces and represent our community for the people that can't, and be that voice for the people that don't have one. So yeah, I'd say it's kind of a call to action. And sometimes that, you know, that can come with some pressure. You know, we sort of are like, ooh, when do we get to relax and have a day off from making all this change? But it's something that I think we're truly called to do.
Do you feel like you have to be more qualified than
Yes.
men, or more qualified than white women?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'll just say, I think you are an underrepresented minority. I do think for me, I've always had to be the most qualified person in the room. I think it has been harder to get opportunities. And so I've made sure, at least on paper, that I have every degree and certification that I can have when I'm applying for roles or leadership programs. So, I mean, the doors are not just open. We sort of have to kick them down ourselves. So for me, that has been a bit more of a challenge. And I do feel like I have to work 10 times harder sometimes.
Mhm.
Swift. How do you
Yes, well,
feel?
I will say just another part of that, that does come internally. A lot of, I think, women in general, women of color, anybody who comes from a marginalized background, we all suffer from imposter syndrome at one point or another. And there's been many times where I walk into a room with, you know, maybe 20 white men in the military, who are the same rank as me or above. And I have to remind myself, I've also been here for 20 years. I'm qualified to be here. I'm going to sit at the front of the table like everybody else. I'm not going to sit in the back, which might have been my first instinct. So it's something that we have to constantly remind ourselves. And over time, that gets a little easier. But I tell people, like, don't be afraid to sit at the front of the table. Just do it. You got to make your place there.
Yeah, and I think that's been well, all my life, that's something women have been trying to do, is like, not just, maybe there's no place for you at the table, so you got to set one, right?
Sit in the back of the room. We all get that. And no, I tell myself, I have a saying, I always sit to the right of the general, like go sit by the general.
Or somebody
So,
say something, they said like, bring your chair with you to the
yeah,
table. If
right.
there's not a chair for you, bring a chair with you, so to
Mhm.
speak. So you just make a space for yourself.
Yeah.
But that takes a lot of courage and a lot of energy. And you're right, there isn't a lot of time out, is there? Like, where's the relaxation? And I mean, we all can find a little bit. Like, if there's no joy in our lives, we can't keep going. Like, that's one thing I've figured out. It's like we have to make space for nurturing our spirits and our families. But given that, you got to really, really appreciate those moments, right? Lena.
Thank you. Thank you. I think, Swift and Fawn, see if I'm on the right path or right track here. I think the shift in our generation, we're like one below, the grandmas and then our parents, and then now here we are. There's a shift somewhere because we weren't taught to sit at the front of the table. You weren't taught to use your voice as a woman of color. Even in your own family, the men, the grandpas, the uncles, the dads were the ones that were speaking, had the floor. So the shift that you're describing, I love because I love that I want the younger women in our communities to be able to hear that going, you know what, you can sit at the front. It's okay. And as my fearless leaders on this call too, he probably knows, yeah, Lena is taking that poll and she's running with it because we can't seem to shut her up. Right. But nonetheless, I think that's where a huge shift is generationally. Right. And I love that because there was a time when we were afraid to.
Yeah.
And there's
Totally.
still a time where you kind of tiptoe walking into that room, that conference table. You still kind of tiptoe, read the room, who's in here, read the vibe, what's the topic, and am I ready to participate? You know, full fists up. So I like the where this is going. I just hope that it continues with the younger generations behind us. But
Yeah.
two generations
It
before
will.
us, it wasn't even a conversation.
Right. Well, I think it'll continue if we continue to have the conversation, and I always tell like younger women, like, don't worry so much about what people think of you. Like, I could give two shits what you think about me. I don't care if you think I'm a bitch because I'm sitting at the front of the table. That's fine with me. I'll sleep through the night just like I always do.
I love our new generation. I will say that Swift and I both have teenagers, and Swift has some of her oldest are young ladies now, and they are amazing, matriarch girls. I mean, just amazing. And I personally have loved what social media has done for Native American people, youngsters of this generation, because they're really out there finding community and space. And for us, I would say when I got out of the military, it was like you had to be very professional and kind of put your culture and your traditions all aside. That's not the case nowadays. It's becoming more normal to see, you bringing your traditions to work and talking very openly about it. And our new generation is just very like sure of who they are. So I love that. They're just like bringing their true authentic selves. And I think it's really awesome. And I think it's important that we model that too, so that people know you can still be traditional but professional at the same time. You've talked about how uncomfortable, like we were definitely raised in that time of like, you don't show your emotions and you wait to be invited to speak. And for Native people, that is more customary, especially for our tribe is, waiting to be invited to speak and, waiting to until somebody asks you for your opinion. So it's something we've had to overcome traditionally. But then when we go home and we're in our traditional ways, we're still able to do that and balance that. So you can truly do both.
Susan?
Well, I'm so impressed. I'm an octogenarian, and I have to be honest with you, ladies. I'm so impressed with what you're doing because you're not only teaching us and sharing with us your own personal experiences, but you're raising your children and working with your families to teach the history. And I think a lot of the disappointment in the current election is because a lot of people don't know history. If they look back, they will see that our wonderful country has gone through incredible upheavals from one side to the other, and we always seem to have come out stronger. So the fact that you're sharing the history and your knowledge, I hope you gals keep talking to others because this is really opening up a whole world for a lot of people whose minds are not perhaps as open as yours are.
Yeah, that's a
Thank you.
That's an excellent point, Susan. There's a lot of hope out there. You're right. And that is one thing I share with my kids. And the younger generation of people is we've been through a lot as a country. We'll get through this. You know, Fawn mentioned before, this is just 4 years in a huge history that we've already been through and that we still have to get through. We'll get through it.
Ours are worse.
Yeah.
It will be different, but we will get through. Yeah. I think for so many of us elders, it's just so thrilling to hear your voices and hear you say things that we were not able to say. Well, some of us said them anyway, but it didn't always go so well.
Right.
Right. And thinking back, I mean, to the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, there is progress. It doesn't feel like it's much sometimes, and there's a lot of slippage back. But yeah, there's just a long way to go still. Barbara, oh, you're muted.
I was raised in a military family, and I would never, ever have imagined the joy and the strength that you two are sharing right now, and that your experience has been as positive as they are. So I am really grateful to hear the things that you shared today. Gives me hope.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
We're happy we could be here.
And opposite, I mean, I appreciate the honest questions, but also the positive nature of the questions. I know I can speak for Swift when I say, like, I've been on panels before and I've been asked outright if I could talk about, sexual harassment that I experienced in the military. And I'm like, whoa, do we just ask people that nowadays, on panels? And like I said, everybody's experiences are different. And it's, maybe don't jump straight to the trauma part of it. Certainly there were difficult times, but Swift and I have both been really fortunate to be surrounded by really good people and really professional teams. And so everybody's experiences are different. So I appreciate the positive tone of this. And, certainly I think women in prior generations went through a lot of difficulties, and but we've seen people, joining the military now that have made sure that protections are in place and that we're not subject to that anymore. So I really appreciate that.
And one thing we can all do is, when the link to this comes out, we can send it to people who maybe their minds, what did you say so politely, aren't as wide open as they might be. But I think it is always real people talking. Real conversation is more moving for a lot of people than rhetoric or hearing a lecture or reading the book or whatever. It's like, oh, look, here's these real people talking about, how they have hope and how they've changed their own lives, and how, military service has actually helped them move forward in the world. And those aren't stories we necessarily think we're going to hear, right? So I really appreciate that you're straight shooting. I mean, you're honest and direct, but you're also not downplaying the strengths of that role in your lives, right?
I think we're both very grateful to have had the opportunity to do it. I mean, I think I joined the military because I had to, so that I could go to college. And I joined in 2000, so I didn't know, 9/11 was going to happen. That sort of changed the trajectory of how I thought it was going to go. But everybody joins for different reasons, and I know I speak for Swift when I say it's really like weird for us when people thank us for our service, because we're like, no, thank you, like, for allowing us to serve, for us to be able to do this. And we came from a really underprivileged background, and so being able to have, like, we have a bunch of college degrees between us, and we can support our children and our families, and we're breaking the curse of generational poverty. So it's really been an honor to be able to do it.
Well, I do have a question that, you certainly don't have to answer, but so I have a transgender daughter and a group called Transfriending, which supports a lot of families. And we've had several military families come through and say, the famous military family support is awesome until you're different. And I'm curious, and again, don't feel like you have to answer if it's not comfortable, but I'm curious if you have experienced some of that as well, or seen it in action somewhere.
I think that's gotten better. I mean, I've served for a while now, especially before, like, when Don't Ask, Don't Tell, was a thing. And I mean, I remember serving with, same-sex families and gay people and transgender people for many years, even before then. And even now, like one of my best friends in the Navy is a transgender sailor, and it's never been an issue. Their transition, I know, was difficult because it was something new in that area. It was like one of the first ones here in Washington State. I'm not in Washington, actually, the other Washington, but you know what I mean, in Washington State. And so there were a lot of like unanswered questions, but according, to her, like it was handled she was like really happy and impressed with how it was handled. She said people asked, all the right questions and wanted to make sure that she was supported through the process. And it's still new, but I was really happy to hear about that positive experience. So I've only seen that positive side to it. It's still, it's still new. It really is. But I think as long as we keep having those discussions, then we can do it. Yeah.
Well, there is a beam of light in a dark time. Thank you for that. I think we all, again, it's like when there's positive things, it's really good to call those out too, because we're all spending a lot of time being angry and upset, but we also need to really celebrate the strengths and the things that are progressing, are moving forward for everybody, I think.
Well, with social media and the news, we only see the negative, and we get, that gets hard. It's hard on you after a while, but there's a lot of really great positive things happening.
Well, you too.
There was a lot of firsts, a lot of great legislation put in place for people that do need protections. I think, especially for transgender people. I mean, the military has made a lot of positive changes over the years with benefits for same-sex families and couples and beneficiaries. And so, even in this election, I'd say go Google the first and some of the great legislation that was put in place. It's not all doom and gloom.
Wow.
Anybody questions or any last minute things you want to add? I just think this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation, even without half the people who were supposed to be here.
For having us.
It's great. Thank you so much.